Hey guys, tonight we wander into a city that seems to float on water, a place where the air hums with trade, ritual, and the faint yapping of creatures you might not expect. This is Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital, shimmering in the evening light. You stand on a stone causeway leading into the heart of the empire, water on both sides rippling as canoes glide by. Merchants call out their goods. Bright red chilies, cacao beans, obsidian blades polished so smooth you can see your own tired face staring back at you. The smell of roasting maize mixes with lake air, and behind it all, the deep toll of a temple drum reminds you that gods are always listening here. And let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive a single day in this city. Between the strict market rules, the rituals you don't fully understand, and the fact that everyone here seems to have calves of steel from walking across endless causeways, you'd be exposed as an outsider in minutes. Still, you linger, fascinated, taking in every flicker of torchlight and every whisper of the lake breeze. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know down in the comments where you're watching from tonight, and what time it is where you are. I love picturing listeners scattered across the world, all winding down together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The market square draws you closer, its stone paving crowded with vendors shouting prices, families bargaining, and children darting between reed baskets. You stop to watch a woman grind maize on a stone metate, her hands moving in a rhythm older than memory. The paste she forms will become tortillas, flat rounds of life itself. You remember reading that maize wasn't just food, it was identity. The Aztecs believed their ancestors were literally formed from maize dough by the gods. You think of that as the smell of tortillas cooking wafts through the square. But something else catches your eye, small figures weaving through the legs of the crowd. At first you mistake them for hairless cats, but then one brushes against your ankle. Its skin is smooth, warm, almost like sun-heated stone. Ears perked, eyes glinting, tail wagging with quiet confidence. This is your first proper look at a xoloitzcuintli, the famous Aztec hairless dog. They trot among the people as if the city belongs to them too, dodging baskets of beans, pausing at a dropped tamale, then moving on without fuss. Here's a mainstream fact. Archaeologists have found xolo bones in household refuse heaps across central Mexico. That means they weren't exotic pets kept only by priests or nobles. They were everyday companions, part of the family unit. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Aztecs believed these dogs could ward off evil spirits simply by sharing your home. Imagine explaining to your neighbor that your roommate is both a heater and a ghost repellent. Multi-purpose indeed. And here's the debate. Historians still argue whether the dogs were primarily raised for warmth and companionship, or if their main role was ritual and occasionally culinary. Spanish conquistadors wrote, often with disgust, that the Aztecs ate them. But was that exaggeration, propaganda, or partial truth? Scholars aren't sure. The torches around the square flare as night settles in. You step aside as another xolo pads past you, its nails clicking on the stone, its eyes locking with yours for just a moment. You realize you're not just wandering through a city, you're stepping into a world where even the smallest companion has a story worth telling. The marketplace fades behind you as you drift into the narrow lanes of Tenochtitlan, streets alive with laughter, the crackle of hearth fires, and the splash of water jars dipped into canals. Here the bustle feels more domestic, families gathering around doorways, reed mats rolled out, and children balancing on the edges of the canal banks with a daring you wouldn't risk even on a good day. And among all this, the little hairless dogs are everywhere. They trot confidently, weaving in and out of groups, their nails clicking softly on stone. One darts past carrying a scrap of maize husk in its mouth, clearly pleased with its treasure. Another stretches lazily in the glow of a torch, so warm it almost looks like a loaf of bread left too long in the oven. They don't act like strays. They act like citizens, entirely at ease in a city designed for them as much as for humans. A woman carrying a clay pot nudges one gently aside with her knee, not in annoyance, but in casual acknowledgement, the way you'd shift around a family member. A boy drops a tortilla crust, and 3 xolos appear as if summoned by invisible bells, politely sniffing before choosing which crumb to devour. You realize these animals aren't outsiders. They're woven seamlessly into the fabric of daily life. Here's a mainstream fact. The Aztecs bred xoloitzcuintlis in different sizes. Larger ones might guard the house or serve in rituals, while smaller ones were favored for warmth and companionship. This wasn't a one-size-fits-all breed. It was versatile, tailored to human needs. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some chronicles mention that the dogs would sometimes be painted or marked with dyes during festivals, little living decorations trotting alongside parades. Imagine the Aztec equivalent of someone dressing up their pug for Halloween, except with actual spiritual gravitas. And here's the debate. Historians still argue whether these dogs roamed so freely because of tolerance, reverence, or necessity. Were they respected like tiny guardians, or simply too useful to shoo away? Some scholars suggest they were semi-feral, slipping between wildness and domesticity, while others insist they were truly cherished members of households. The truth, as usual, likely rests somewhere between the wag of a tail and the scrape of a tortilla crumb. You continue wandering and notice how people treat them with familiarity. No one scolds them for begging, no one ties them to posts. They hover close to families, trotting behind groups as though they've been assigned as escorts. You begin to sense that these dogs are more than companions, they're part of the city's rhythm, padding through the heartbeat of Tenochtitlan as naturally as the flow of water through its canals. One particularly bold pup follows you, its wide eyes reflecting the firelight. It pads along as you turn a corner, clearly deciding you're now part of its nightly patrol. You chuckle softly at the thought, here you are, in the capital of an empire, and your guide is a naked little dog with too much confidence. Then again, you're not about to argue. The air cools quickly once the sun slips behind the mountains, and you feel it first in your fingertips, then in your toes, the way the lake breeze snakes through alleys like a curious cat. The Valley of Mexico sits high, over 2,000 meters, so nights bite even after warm afternoons, and you start to understand why everyone walks briskly and why capes flutter from shoulders like portable walls. A family beckons you into their courtyard, a low room of adobe and reed with a hearth's last glow fading to embers. Reed mats, peat tes, unroll with a whisper across the floor, and the household xolos immediately claim strategic positions, each one a small, efficient furnace with paws. You stretch your legs and one settles across your feet, hot as a sun-warmed stone, and your toes sign a peace treaty with the night. A grandmother drapes a Telmatli cloak over your shoulders and chuckles as another dog shoulders in against your calf, sighing with the authority of a seasoned bedwarmer. Here's your mainstream fact. Aztec homes often relied on braziers for heat and cooking, but with limited fire at night to control smoke, warmth came from bodies, textiles, and smart design. Reed mats insulated from the chill ground, capes trapped heat, and yes, the household dogs doubled as heat sources, no wood required, minimal maintenance, and only occasional bark updates. Aztec HVAC, dog approved. The family moves through a practiced ritual. Embers are banked under a clay lid, water jars are topped, door screens are tugged into place to blunt the wind. The smallest child points to your assigned companion and announces, very seriously, that this one is the footkeeper. The dog yawns, exposing tiny, neat teeth, then presses closer, its skin radiating a steady, medicinal warmth. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some people believed a xolo's heat wasn't merely comfort, but healing. Place the dog on a sore joint or an aching belly and let the warmth pull the pain away. A bedside manner with wagging tail and excellent bedside attendance. From outside, drums thud distantly. From inside, breath slow and regular begins to synchronize, a household metronome. The city's water roads hush to a soft slap against stone. You note how the hairlessness helps. No wet first smell after evening rain, no mats to dry, just skin to skin, like holding a warm gourd. Someone slips a baked river stone, warmed earlier on the comel, into a cloth and tucks it near another mat. You think, with a sleepy grin, that the Aztecs invented the deluxe package, hot stone and hot dog. Historians still argue whether co-sleeping with dogs was primarily about health and warmth, or whether it flowed first from religious meanings, keeping a sacred guide close so it would learn your scent and guard your spirit. Perhaps warmth justified belief, or belief justified warmth. Perhaps, like most good bedtime arrangements, it just worked. The grandmother scratches the dog's neck, it closes its eyes, half smile, half doze, and you feel the day leak out of your muscles. In this city of stone and water, the simplest luxury is heat that leans on you, sighs, and refuses to leave. You pull the till matly tighter, listen to the lake breathe, and let the living blanket do the rest. The fire dies down to a faint red glow, and in the stillness you hear voices outside murmuring prayers. You follow the sound into a courtyard near a temple wall, where priests in cotton cloaks kneel with offerings. At their feet, more of the little xolos gather, heads tilted, ears alert, as if they too are listening for something just beyond human hearing. A priest lifts a hand, tracing a slow circle in the air, and tells you that these dogs are more than companions, they are psychopomps, guides for souls on the journey across the afterlife's rivers. Here's a mainstream fact. The Aztecs believed the underworld, Mictlan, was not a place of punishment, but a long, challenging journey. The dead needed guides, and the xoloitzcuintli was said to ferry the soul safely through. Archaeologists have even found dog burials alongside human ones, a clear sign of that partnership extending beyond life. The priest leans closer, whispering a story. When a person dies, their spirit approaches a great river too wide to cross alone. A dog, if it recognizes you, leaps into the water, swims steadily, and allows you to cling to its back. Only then can you pass. Without that bond, you might wander, lost in shadows. The priest chuckles softly and points at your borrowed companion from last night. That one would probably get distracted by fish halfway across, but it would still come back for you. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some myths warn that if you mistreated a dog in life, it would refuse to carry you after death. Imagine your soul stuck at the shoreline, begging, while your former pet just tilts its head like, "Oh, now you want to play fetch?" The message was simple. Kindness to animals echoed into eternity. And here's the scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether this belief was universal among the Aztecs or whether it varied across regions and classes. Was every family convinced their household xolo would one day guide them, or was this a priestly teaching that gained traction in ritual contexts? The evidence, burials, codices, oral traditions suggests multiple interpretations, layered and sometimes contradictory. Like many religious ideas, it blurred the line between doctrine and daily comfort. You watch as the priests scatter marigold petals, their orange glow almost electric in torchlight. The dogs step carefully through them, curling at the edges of mats as the chanting deepens. A breeze stirs, carrying the scent of copal incense, sweet, resinous, and heavy enough to make your eyes water. You realize this is not a temple of stone alone, but of living warmth, of dogs lying quietly as if guarding a door you can't yet see. As the chanting fades, one of the xolos ambles over and presses its head against your knee, skin hot and oddly reassuring. You kneel, resting your hand on its smooth back, and for a fleeting moment you imagine clinging to it across some vast, dark river. The thought should scare you, but it doesn't. It feels strangely comforting, like the promise of a fairy always waiting just for you. The courtyard empties as the priests retire, and you follow the scent of roasted maize back toward the homes along a quiet canal. The sky is ink black now, pierced by stars so sharp you almost wince. You step into a household where a family sits cross-legged around clay bowls. The steam rises from a stew of beans and squash, rich and earthy, and tortillas stack in a woven basket. A couple of xolos hover at the edges, waiting with patience that only comes from practice. One child breaks off a piece of tortilla and sneaks it to the smallest dog, who swallows it whole with the grace of a magician's disappearing act. The mother sighs but doesn't scold. It's clear the dogs are part of the mealtime rhythm. Here's your mainstream fact. Maize was the foundation of Aztec diet, appearing in every form imaginable: tortillas, tamales, atole porridge. Archaeologists analyzing isotopes in bones confirm that maize dominated both human and dog diets, binding them in shared sustenance. You're handed a bowl yourself, the stew thick and comforting, and notice that a dog has stretched against your hip like it has already claimed its share of warmth. You lift a spoonful and chuckle at the irony. You and this little heater are basically eating the same thing, minus a splash of chili for you, because trust me, the Aztecs didn't hold back on spice. Imagine being a dog trying to lick a chili stew, bedtime snack, or bedtime regret. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some records say families occasionally gave dogs tiny cakes of maize dough shaped like bones, a kind of proto-treat. Whether that was ritual, play, or both, it suggests a tenderness easily overlooked in tales of warriors and sacrifices. You picture a child proudly handing a maize bone to their xolo, only for it to be inhaled in one gulp, 3,000 years ago, and still the same comedy. But historians still argue whether the feeding of dogs symbolized partnership or practicality. Were scraps given out of affection, or simply to fatten animals for eventual ritual use? The Spaniards, ever dramatic, insisted the latter. Yet the abundance of household dog burials suggests something gentler, that meals were shared not only out of function but out of bond. As you chew, the debate feels less academic, more immediate. The dog pressed against your leg isn't some livestock project. It's a creature breathing in rhythm with you, hungry and loyal all at once. The stew warms your stomach, the dogs warm your side, and the family leans into quiet chatter, laughter punctuating the night. Someone plucks at a drum in the corner, not the martial thunder you heard earlier, but a lazy beat meant to lull. You realize that the dogs, too, are dozing now, full bellies pressed close to reed mats. The household feels whole because of them, as though food and warmth are incomplete without that snuffling, hairless presence at the edge of every meal. The night carries you onward toward the heart of celebration, where torches line wide plazas and music spirals into the air. The drums are no longer soft and sleepy but insistent, echoing across stone walls until your chest hums with the rhythm. Flutes weave above it, and you step into a festival alive with color. Dancers whirl in embroidered cotton, feathers catching the firelight, and at the edges of the spectacle, yes, you see them, dogs draped in garlands, their smooth skin painted with streaks of red and yellow dye. They trot alongside processions with surprising solemnity, little legs keeping pace with warriors who tower above them. No one laughs at the sight. Here, the dogs are not comic but sacred, absorbed into the choreography of faith. A priest lifts his hand, sprinkling petals over one particularly stoic xolo wearing a necklace of shells. The crowd murmurs approval. Here's your mainstream fact. Aztec festivals often combined spectacle, ritual sacrifice, and community feasting. Dogs played roles in many ceremonies, sometimes as honored participants, sometimes as offerings to the gods. Archaeological evidence includes canine remains found in temple precincts, suggesting ritual inclusion. But here's the quirky tidbit. In some ceremonies, dogs were painted with bright pigments not only to distinguish them, but also to mark them as sacred intermediaries. Imagine being slathered in red ochre and told you're now a divine representative. Some dogs probably strutted with pride, others probably tried to lick it off. And here's the scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether dogs were primarily symbolic sacrifices or whether they retained their identity as companions even in ritual death. Did families mourn them like kin, or did the spiritual logic override personal grief? Codices show both tenderness and ceremony, blurring the line between pet and offering. The plaza swells with song, the dancers' feet stamping patterns that shake the torches. You notice a circle where families gather with food, tamales unwrapped, cacao drinks frothed to foam, laughter spilling like music. The dogs hover close, still painted, still decorated, but now nudging elbows for scraps like it's the most natural thing. You catch one sneaking under a reed bench, emerging with a stolen piece of maize cake clamped triumphantly in its jaws. Even in holy moments, stomachs win arguments. A child tugs your sleeve and points upward. The smoke drifts into constellations, and she whispers that the dogs are not just here for tonight. When their bodies leave, their spirits leap into the sky, becoming stars that guide the dead. You tilt your head, and for a moment the night sky seems full of wagging tails, little pinpricks of warmth scattered across the firmament. The drums fade into a slower cadence, the festival winding into stories told at fire's edge. You feel the day's steps in your legs, and yet the image of painted dogs stays with you, half sacred, half mischievous, entirely woven into the tapestry of celebration. The festival slowly dissolves behind you, leaving faint echoes of drums and the smell of copal clinging to your clothes. You wander toward the edge of the city, where strangers in armor once set foot, Spaniards, wide-eyed and bewildered, scribbling accounts of everything they saw. And of course, they noticed the dogs. In their letters, they described the hairless Xolos with a mixture of fascination and distaste, as if unsure whether to call them sacred creatures or supper on legs. Here's your mainstream fact. Spanish chroniclers like Bernal Diaz del Castillo noted the presence of these dogs in Aztec markets and households. Some even claimed entire stalls sold them roasted, though the accuracy of those reports remains debated. To Spaniards, already shocked by chocolate drinks and feathered headdresses, the sight of a hairless companion dog blurred into the category of strange things natives eat. Now for the quirky tidbit. Some conquistadors swore the dogs looked like miniature pigs without hair, and one record even called them ugly yet warm, probably not the marketing tagline the Aztecs would have chosen. Imagine arriving in a bustling capital of 200,000 people, seeing canals and temples beyond anything in Europe, and the detail you scribble down with the most passion? Weird dogs, kind of tasty. Priorities, apparently. Historians still argue whether the Spaniards exaggerated their culinary role to paint the Aztecs as barbaric. Was it propaganda meant to shock readers back in Europe? Or did dog meat really feature more prominently than indigenous accounts admit? Excavations of refused pits show some canine bones with cut marks, but the evidence suggests selective use, not a daily dinner. The truth, as ever, wags its tail between extremes. As you walk along the canal bank, you can almost imagine the conquistadors standing here, wrinkling their noses at a Xolo trotting past, while an Aztec child casually scoops it up like an oversized hairless cat. Cultures collided not just over gold or gods, but over pets. What was sacred warmth to one became a curiosity, even a joke, to another. The dog that has been following you all evening trots ahead, stopping every few steps to glance back, as if checking you haven't lost your way. You smile at the thought. Even now, centuries later, it feels like the role of these animals is still guiding, whether across rivers of the afterlife or just across cobblestones slick with night dew. The Spaniards might have written their confusion, but standing here, you don't feel confused at all. You feel accompanied. The night deepens, quieter now, the drums long faded and the air carrying only the soft lap of water against canal walls. You follow your companion dog through winding lanes until the city's bustle feels like a dream. Ahead, a small shrine glimmers faintly in torchlight. Families leave offerings, a clay bowl of maize, a few cacao beans, and even a woven mat with paw prints pressed into its surface. It strikes you how deeply the Xolo has crossed the boundary between the ordinary and the sacred. Here's your mainstream fact. The breed nearly disappeared after the conquest, dismissed by colonizers as strange or undesirable, yet pockets of communities in rural Mexico quietly preserved them. Today, the xoloitzcuintli is celebrated as Mexico's national dog, a living bridge to the pre-Hispanic world. And here's your quirky tidbit. In modern times, the dogs often appear in Day of the Dead altars, imagined once again as guides for spirits. Some households even set out bowls of water specifically for the dogs who help the souls cross. It's a tradition so enduring you can practically picture a hairless pup trotting happily between candlelit marigolds. Historians still argue whether our modern fascination with the Xolo reflects continuity of Aztec belief or a romantic revival shaped by nationalism. Are we honoring an unbroken lineage of reverence, or have we woven a modern story over ancient threads? The debate lingers, but the dog itself, warm and real at your side, doesn't bother with arguments. It just exists, steady, breathing, alive. You pause at the canal, the stars sharp above, and the dog presses against your calf, radiating heat. The city is hushed, and you realize that warmth, companionship, and myth have always been entangled. Whether sacred guide, dinner table curiosity, or modern symbol, The Zolo has endured because it fills a space between practical and spiritual, between hearth and heaven. You sit on a reed mat, listening to the hush of water, the faint hiss of torches. The dog curls into your lap, a little furnace, a little guardian, and you let your breath fall into rhythm with its own. Tenochtitlan fades into silence, but the warmth stays.